Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became the last hero in a post-Justice League Earth. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The universe did not scream when it tore. It hummed. For Izuku Midoriya, the hum was a physical thing, a dissonant chord that vibrated through his bones and rattled his teeth. One moment, he was a comet of green lightning, arcing through the war-torn skyline of Mizutsufu. The next, the world dissolved into a nauseating kaleidoscope of impossible color and shrieking physics. He was tumbling, end over end, through a tunnel of fractured light. The air, if it could be called that, was thick as water and tasted of ozone and burnt sugar. His body, honed by 1,000 battles and pushed to the very precipice of human potential, was useless here. There was no ground to push off from, no air to manipulate with a smash. He was a passenger on a ride he hadn't chosen, a leaf in a cosmic hurricane. What quirk was that? The thought was a desperate anchor in the storm of sensation. The villain had been a nobody, a desperate opportunist with a reality-warping quirk he barely understood. A final, panicked backlash. A golden rule of heroics that All Might had drilled into him was to never underestimate a cornered foe. He had gotten complacent for a split second. A single, fatal second. More terrifying than the physical vertigo was the silence in his soul. The vestiges of One for All, the choir of past users who lived within him, were flickering. Their presence, normally a warm, comforting weight in the back of his mind, was now a staticky, intermittent signal, like a radio station from a distant galaxy. "Kid! What's happening?" The raw, powerful voice of the fifth user, Daigoro Banjo, was shredded by static, words swallowed by the vortex. "Hold on, ninth! Anchor yourself!" Nana Shimura's voice, usually a beacon of strength, was faint, strained. He could feel her reaching for him, a phantom touch that dissipated before it could connect. He tried to answer, to call out to them, but the effort was like screaming into a gale-force wind. His own thoughts were scattered. The connection frayed, stretched thin across an impossible distance. One by one, their voices faded, not into silence, but into the overwhelming hum of the void. He was alone. Truly alone, for the first time since inheriting his power. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the disorientation. One for All was not just his quirk. It was his family, his history, his connection to the legacy he fought to uphold. Without them, what was he? The hum intensified, rising in pitch to an unbearable shriek. The kaleidoscope of colors collapsed into a blinding, searing white. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for an impact that felt like it could unravel him atom by atom. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. The shriek cut to absolute silence. The sensation of tumbling was replaced by a brutal, unforgiving stop. Gravity, a friend he hadn't realized he missed, returned with a vengeance. Crack. The sound was a sickening mixture of concrete, metal, and his own body. He landed with the grace of a dropped anvil, his left shoulder and side taking the brunt of the impact. The world was a spinning dark blur. The smell hit him first, a thick, putrid cocktail of stale, acidic rain, wet garbage, and a deep, metallic scent of rust and decay that seemed to seep from the very stones. It was the smell of a city that had given up. He groaned, a raw sound torn from his throat. Pain, sharp and immediate, flared in his shoulder, radiating down his arm. A dislocated shoulder, at least. Maybe fractured ribs. He coughed, and the coppery taste of blood filled his mouth. He blinked, trying to force the world into focus. Rain. Cold and relentless. It slicked his hair to his forehead and ran in rivulets down his face, mingling with his own sweat and blood. He was sprawled in an alley, a canyon of crumbling brick and rusted fire escapes that clawed at a sky the color of a dead television screen. There were no stars. No moon. Just a low-hanging, oppressive ceiling of bruised purple clouds, faintly illuminated by an unseen, sickly yellow light source beyond the rooftops. Izuku pushed himself up with his good arm, his muscles screaming in protest. His hero costume, the gamma suit that had seen him through the war, was torn and battered. The reinforced plating over his shoulder was cracked, the fabric beneath shredded. He took a moment, forcing his breathing to slow, a technique Gran Torino had beaten into him. Assess. Analyze. Act. Assess. Shoulder dislocated. Multiple cracked ribs, judging by the fire in his chest with every breath. Numerous cuts and abrasions. His connection to the vestiges was there, but it was muted, a single, faint ember where a bonfire had once roared. He could feel the power of one for all thrumming in his limbs, a familiar current, but the guiding voices were gone. The silence was deafening. Analyze. He wasn't in Muzurifu. He wasn't anywhere in Japan. The architecture was all wrong. It was American? No, more than that. It was Gotham-esque, like something from a pre-Quark-era comic book, but real and impossibly grim. The buildings were grand, ornate monoliths of stone and steel, but they were decaying from the inside out. Windows were boarded up, stone gargoyles were chipped and stained with black streaks, and a thick layer of grime covered everything. He listened. The ever-present hum of a vibrant city, the drone of traffic, the distant chatter of crowds, the thrum of life, was absent. There was only the patter of the rain, the distant, mournful cry of a siren that faded as quickly as it came, and an all-encompassing, heavy silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a graveyard. He pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly. Using his right hand, he gripped his left arm, took a deep, sharp breath, and with a grunt of pain, snapped his shoulder back into its socket. The world went white for a second, but the immediate, sharp pain subsided into a deep, throbbing ache. Better. He limped to the mouth of the alley, peering out onto the street. The buildings were even more imposing from here, their tops lost in the low-hanging gloom. The street was wide, paved with cracked asphalt. Neon signs flickered weakly, some letters dead, casting pathetic pools of color onto the wet ground. Pawn shop. Liquor. Rikers. But there were no people. No cars. Just the rain and the silence. This world felt broken. It felt like the aftermath of the war he had just been fighting, but without the hope of rebuilding. It was as if the war had been lost a long time ago, and everyone was just living in the ruins. His stomach clenched. Uraraka. Ida. Todoroki. All Might. His mom. A wave of profound, soul-crushing dread washed over him. The villain's quirk hadn't just teleported him across the country. This was somewhere else entirely. Another time? Another world? The silence from the vestiges seemed to confirm his worst fear. He was cut off. He had to find a way back. He had to. His train of thought was shattered by a sudden noise from the other end of the street. A sharp, electronic crackle, followed by a woman's cry of fear. Instinct took over. Before he could consciously decide, Izuku was moving. He activated One for All, keeping it at a low, controlled 5%. Green lightning, a stark, vibrant contrast to the city's muted palette, flickered around his limbs. He shot down the street, a silent green blur, his battered iron-soled boots making almost no sound on the wet pavement. He rounded a corner, and the scene unfolded before him. A man, a woman, and a small child, a family, were pressed against the graffiti-covered wall of a closed theater. They were thin, their clothes patched and worn. Desperation was etched onto their faces. Towering over them were three figures, hulking and grotesque. They weren't villains in the way he was used to. There were no flashy costumes, no dramatic monikers. They were thugs, scavengers, their bodies crudely augmented with scavenge technology. One had a glowing, red cybernetic eye that whirred as it scanned the family. Another had thick, hydraulic pistons grafted onto his arms, wires snaking over his skin. The third, clearly the leader, held a sparking baton that crackled with contained energy. "Come on, old man," the leader grunted, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "The warden wants his tithe. You know the rules. Power cells, medgel, anything shiny. Hand it over, and we let your kid keep her kneecaps." "We have nothing," the father said, his voice trembling but defiant as he shielded his wife and daughter. "We gave everything last week." "Then you're nothing," the thug with the pistons sneered, flexing his augmented hands with a loud hiss of pneumatics. The leader raised the sparking baton. The mother whimpered, hugging the child tighter. The child, a little girl no older than Eri had been when he first met her, stared with wide, terrified eyes, too scared to even cry. Izuku didn't hesitate. He saw a family in danger. He saw bullies preying on the weak. The context didn't matter. The location didn't matter. This was his purpose. He pushed off, increasing his output to 8%. To the thugs, it was as if the world glitched. One moment, they were menacing the family. The next, a flash of green lightning erupted in their midst. The leader, Scrap as his compatriots called him, felt a stunning impact on his wrist. A precise kick, not with a boot, but with a reinforced metal sole that felt like being hit by a freight train. The energy baton flew from his grasp, clattering uselessly across the street. Before he could even register the pain, something fast and black, like a living shadow, shot out and wrapped around his torso, hoisting him into the air. Black Whip, the thug with the piston arms, Glitch, turned, his cybernetic eye struggling to track the movement. He saw a figure in a torn, green costume, a rabbit-like cowl framing a determined, fierce face. He raised his heavy arms to smash, but the figure was already gone from where he'd been. A concussive blast of air, a Delaware Smash Air Force, slammed into his chest. It wasn't a direct hit, but the force was enough to knock him off balance, his heavy augmentations making him clumsy. He stumbled back, crashing into a pile of overflowing trash cans. The third thug, the one with the cybernetic eye, tried to activate a plasma projector on his forearm. He didn't even get to aim. A green streak appeared before him, and a powerful, open-palmed shove to his chest sent him flying back into the brick wall with a sickening crunch. He slid to the ground, unconscious, his red eye flickering and dying. Izuku landed lightly between the fallen thugs and the family. He yanked on the Black Whip tendril, slamming Scrap into the still-conscious Glitch, tangling them both in a heap of groaning limbs and malfunctioning tech. He shot another 2 tendrils out, binding them securely against the lamppost. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 5 seconds. He stood, the green energy of one for all slowly dissipating around him. He turned to the family, his expression softening. He gave them what he hoped was a reassuring smile, the one he'd practiced 1,000 times, the one that was supposed to say, "It's okay now." "Why?" "Because I am here." "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle. The reaction was not what he expected. There was no relief. No tears of gratitude. No cheers. There was only fear. A deeper, more profound fear than what they'd shown the thugs. The father grabbed his wife and daughter, pulling them further back, pushing them behind him as if Izuku himself were the monster. "What have you done?" the man whispered, his voice hoarse with terror. Izuku's smile faltered. "What?" I was just helping." "Helping?" the man hissed, his eyes wide and frantic, darting from Izuku to the sky and back again. "You don't get it. You fight like them. From before." Loud. Flashy. Drawing attention. The woman tugged on her husband's arm. "Please, just go," she pleaded, her voice a bare whisper, her eyes fixed on Izuku. "You need to go. Now." Izuku was stunned into silence. He looked from their terrified faces to the bound thugs, who were now struggling and cursing. He had saved them. He was a hero. Why were they looking at him like he just signed their death warrant? "They'll know," the father continued, his voice cracking. "The wardens. They have watchers everywhere. They'll have seen this. They'll have seen you. They'll come down on this whole sector. They'll make an example of us for associating with you." He took a step back, pulling his family with him. "You haven't saved us. You've just painted a target on all of our backs. You've doomed us." Without another word, the man turned and fled, dragging his silent, terrified family with him into the labyrinthine darkness of a side alley. They disappeared into the rain, leaving Izuku standing alone in the street, the weight of the man's words crashing down on him with more force than any physical blow. "You've doomed us." The green glow around him faded completely. The cold of the rain seemed to seep deeper into his bones. He looked at his hands, the hands that had saved so many, that had been a symbol of hope. Here, in this broken world, they were a beacon for something else. A beacon for punishment. What kind of place was this? What had happened here that would make people fear a hero more than the villains? He was so lost in his spiraling thoughts that he almost missed it. A faint red light, high up on the corner of an adjacent rooftop. He squinted, his hero-trained eyes focusing. It wasn't a light. It was a lens, a drone. It was small, sleek, and black, shaped like a beetle with multiple optical sensors. It was unlike any drone design he had ever seen, no visible rotors, hovering in the rain with an unnerving, silent stability. It had been watching him. The whole time. It was one of the watchers the man had mentioned. As soon as he locked eyes with its primary lens, the red light blinked once, and the drone zipped away with incredible speed, vanishing into the oppressive cloud cover without a sound. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature ran down Izuku's spine. The father was right. He had been seen. And whatever was in charge here now knew he existed. He needed to move. He needed to find shelter, to figure out what was going on. He cast one last look at the groaning thugs tied to the lamppost, and then down the alley where the family had vanished. An ache bloomed in his chest, a hollow feeling of failure and profound confusion. He had won the fight, but he had lost something far more important. He had tried to bring hope, and had only delivered fear. He turned to leave, to melt back into the shadows himself, when a new sound cut through the rain. It was a low, electric hum, so faint it was almost subliminal. It grew steadily, a clean, powerful sound completely at odds with the decaying city. Headlights cut through the gloom at the far end of the street. They weren't the sickly yellow of the city's lights, but a sharp, focused white. They swept across the wet asphalt, illuminating the rain as a curtain of silver. A vehicle was approaching, but it made no engine noise. Only that clean, powerful hum. Izuku tensed, dropping into a low defensive stance. Was this the warden the thugs had mentioned? Had they arrived this quickly? He gathered the embers of one for all, ready to fight or flee. The vehicle emerged from the darkness. It was long, low, and wide, a machine of sharp angles and matte black armor plating that seemed to drink the light. It looked like a predator, a shark designed for city streets. It rolled to a silent stop about 50 feet away from him, its white headlights pinning him in place. It was a machine built for intimidation, a symbol of overwhelming power. Izuku braced himself. His mind raced, calculating trajectories, escape routes, potential attacks. Blackwhip was ready, Fa Gene was primed. He was injured and alone, but he wouldn't go down without a fight. No doors opened. No weapons deployed. For a long, tense moment, the only movement was the rain streaking down its armored chassis. Then, with a barely audible hiss of hydraulics, a section of the canopy retracted. But no one climbed out. Instead, a complex, multi-jointed robotic arm unfolded from the interior, extending out over the hood of the car. It moved with a silent, fluid precision that spoke of technology far beyond the crude cybernetics of the street thugs. A blue light emanated from a projector at its tip, coalescing in the rain-filled air between Izuku and the vehicle. The light flickered, resolving into a three-dimensional hologram. It was the head and shoulders of a man. An old man. So old he looked ancient, like a withered statue carved from granite and regret. His face was a roadmap of scars, his hair was a shock of white, thin and wispy. Tubes, thin, translucent, were visible running into his nose and along his neck, disappearing below the frame of the hologram. But it was his eyes that held Izuku captive. They were a pale, piercing blue, sunken in shadowed sockets, but they burned with a fierce, weary intelligence. They were the eyes of a man who had seen the end of the world and had simply refused to die. The hologram flickered as the man coughed, a dry, rattling sound that was amplified by the projector. When he spoke, his voice was a low, gravelly rasp, strained and weak, yet it carried an undeniable weight of command. It was a voice accustomed to being obeyed. "I don't know what you are," the old man said, his holographic eyes scanning Izuku from head to toe, lingering on the green lightning emblem of his costume, the iron soles of his boots, the determined set of his jaw. The analysis was so intense it felt physical. "Or where you came from. Your energy signature is an anomaly. Uncatalogued." The man paused, his gaze flicking to the thugs still bound to the lamppost, then back to Izuku. "But you fight like they used to," he continued, and for the first time, a flicker of something other than exhaustion entered his voice. It wasn't hope. It was something closer to academic curiosity, mixed with a deep, ancient pain. With conviction. With a foolish amount of self-sacrifice. Izuku remained silent, his body coiled, ready for a trick. Who was this man? An ally? The master of the Watchers? The ultimate power in this desolate city? The warden's enforcers will be here in minutes, the old man stated, not as a threat, but as a simple, undeniable fact. They will not be as clumsy as those scavengers. They will not ask questions. They will put you down, and they will sterilize this entire city block. He looked directly into Izuku's eyes, a connection across the rain-swept distance. The weariness in his face was profound, the look of a man carrying the weight of 1,000 ghosts. You have a choice. Stay here and die for nothing, a meaningless spark in the dark. Or you can come with me. The robotic arm gestured back towards the silent, waiting vehicle. It's not safe out here. Izuku stared, his mind reeling. Every instinct screamed at him to be wary. This was a trap. It had to be. But the man's words echoed the father's warning, and looking into those ancient, intelligent eyes, he felt a strange, inexplicable pull. It wasn't trust. It was a recognition of a shared burden. This man, whoever he was, understood loss. He understood the fight. And right now, lost and alone in a world that feared him, Izuku Midoriya had no other options. The path back to his own world was gone. The people he tried to save had run from him. The only hand reaching out to him was a hologram projected from a ghost's war machine. He slowly, deliberately, straightened from his defensive crouch. He gave a short, sharp nod. The old man's expression didn't change, but the tension in the air seemed to lessen. The hologram flickered and died. The robotic arm retracted back into the vehicle. With another near-silent hiss, a section of the car's armored plating slid open, revealing a passenger side door. An invitation. Taking a deep breath that sent a fresh spike of pain through his ribs, Izuku limped forward, leaving the bound thugs and the broken street behind him. He stepped out of the rain and into the dark, silent interior of the machine, the door sealing shut behind him with the sound of a vault locking. The world outside vanished, and he was plunged into the quiet, clinical darkness of the last son of Gotham's final gambit. The interior of the machine was a sensory deprivation chamber. The moment the armored door sealed with a pneumatic hiss, the chaotic symphony of the city, the relentless patter of rain, the distant, mournful sirens, the very taste of decay in the air, was completely expunged. All that remained was a profound, humming silence and the cool, sterile scent of filtered air and polished metal. There were no windows, plunging Izuku into an almost total darkness, save for the faint, ambient glow of a few indicator lights on a dashboard he couldn't quite make out. The vehicle began to move, but the sensation was unnervingly smooth. There were no jolts from cracked pavement, no sway of momentum. It felt less like driving and more like gliding, a phantom cutting its way through a dead world. Izuku sat rigidly in the passenger seat, his uninjured hand gripping the edge of the composite material, every muscle tense. His mind, a frantic whirlwind of questions, latched onto the only thing it could analyze, his immediate surroundings. The seat was a high-density polymer, ergonomically molded but unforgiving. The air was cool and dry. The hum was constant, a low-frequency thrum that he could feel in his teeth. It was the sound of immense, contained power. He was a prisoner, he realized, but a willing one. He had walked into the cage. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Who was the old man? What did he want? The questions circled like vultures. My apologies for the Spartan accommodations. The old man's voice suddenly filled the cabin, emanating from unseen speakers. It was clearer now, without the distortion of the hologram, but no less weary. It was the voice of a man speaking from his own deathbed. Windows are a structural weakness. A liability I discarded decades ago. Izuku jumped slightly, startled. Where are we going? He asked, his voice sounding small in the confined space. Somewhere safe, the voice replied. The only safe place left. Izuku felt the vehicle tilt, a gentle but unmistakable downward slope. The humming changed in pitch as the machine accelerated, moving far faster than seemed possible on the ruined city streets. He had a brief, disorienting sensation of passing through something, a subtle pressure change in his ears, like descending in a high-speed elevator. They were going down. Deep down. The journey continued in silence for what felt like an eternity. Izuku's mind, deprived of external stimuli, turned inward. He thought of the family, their faces twisted in terror at the sight of him. "You've doomed us." The words were a fresh wound. In his world, his presence, the presence of a hero, was a promise of safety. Here, it was a curse. What could have happened to turn the world so upside down? Finally, the humming subsided and the vehicle came to a smooth, final stop. For a moment, there was only absolute silence. Then, with a series of deep, resonant clunks, unseen locks disengaged. A brilliant white light flooded the cabin as the canopy and door on his side lifted upwards in a single, silent motion. Izuku blinked against the sudden brightness, his eyes watering. He stepped out of the vehicle and onto a platform of polished, dark metal. The air that greeted him was cold, ancient, and carried the faint, clean scent of limestone and falling water. As his eyes adjusted, his breath caught in his throat. He was in a cave. This simple, three-word description felt like a profound understatement, a betrayal of the sheer, magnificent scale of the place. He was standing on a raised causeway in a cavern so vast it felt like an underground cathedral. The ceiling was a jagged tapestry of stalactites, lost in shadows hundreds of feet above. To his left, a massive waterfall cascaded down a sheer rock face, its roar a constant, powerful bass note that echoed through the immense space, feeding a dark, placid river that wound its way through the cavern floor. The cave was a fusion of raw nature and impossible technology. Computer terminals with vast, holographic displays were built directly into the rock walls. Walkways and platforms crisscrossed the chasm at various heights. And everywhere there was the symbol. A stylized bat, etched into the floor, displayed on monitors, subtly integrated into the architecture. A symbol of a hero from a bygone age. A hero from stories. The Batcave, the old man's voice rasped, this time not from a speaker, but from a short distance away. Izuku turned. The driver's side of the vehicle was open. Standing there, leaning heavily on a high-tech cane that seemed to be the only thing keeping him upright, was the man from the hologram. In person, he was even more diminished. A frail, skeletal figure swallowed by a simple, dark gray robe. His skin was pale and thin, stretched taut over a face of sharp angles and old, white scars. One scar, a vicious crescent, cut from his temple down to his jaw, pulling one side of his mouth into a permanent, grim line. His hands, gripping the head of his cane, were gnarled with arthritis and trembled with a fine, persistent tremor. He was a ruin of a man, but his eyes were the same. Pale blue chips of ice that missed nothing, burning with a terrifying, unyielding intensity. "You are Izuku Midoriya," the old man stated. It wasn't a question. Izuku's blood ran cold. How do you know my name?" "The drone that observed you performed a deep spectrum scan. It captured your biometrics, your unique energy signature, and a faint transdimensional resonance," the old man explained, his voice a dry whisper. He took a painful, shuffling step forward. "My systems cross-referenced that resonance against the multiversal archives. Archives compiled from the notes of a friend who could run between worlds. It took a few minutes to sift through the infinite possibilities, but your existence, your quirk, one for all, it was a match. An Earth designated 7849. A world where 80% of the population developed superpowers. A world still in its age of heroes." The confirmation hit Izuku like a physical blow. It was true. He was trapped. I have to get back," he stammered, the words tumbling out. "My friends, my family, they're in the middle of a war. They need me. There is no going back," the old man said, his voice flat, devoid of pity. "The energy required to breach the dimensional barrier is astronomical. The machine that sent you here did so by accident, a catastrophic, one-off event. A key that broke in the lock. You are stranded here, son. Just like the rest of us." The finality in his tone extinguished the frantic spark of hope in Izuku's chest, leaving only cold ash. He looked around the vast, empty cave, at the silent, sophisticated technology, and for the first time, he truly understood the scale of his isolation. "Follow me," the old man commanded, turning and beginning a slow, agonizing shuffle across the causeway. Izuku, numb with shock and grief, could do nothing but obey. He followed the old man past the supercomputer, its main screen displaying a rotating, 3D model of Izuku's own body, covered in lines of complex data and analysis. He saw readouts of his cellular structure, the energy flowing through his veins, the network of old, healed fractures lacing his bones, a testament to his long, painful journey to control his power. But the old man led him past the computers, past the armory of advanced-looking weaponry and gadgets, towards the back of the cavern. Here, the technological marvels gave way to something far more somber. The space was arranged like a shrine. Or a crypt. Set into alcoves carved from the natural rock were massive, spotless glass cases, each illuminated by a single, respectful beam of light. Inside each case was a relic. An artifact of a fallen god. Izuku stopped before the first one, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside, draped over a simple, black pedestal, was a cape. It was a rich, royal red, made of a fabric that seemed to drink the light. But it was torn, shredded near the bottom, and a large, jagged hole was burned through the center, right where the iconic yellow S shield had once been. The edges of the hole were blackened and crystalline, as if exposed to an unimaginable heat. Superman, Izuku breathed the name, a name known across dimensions, a synonym for hope itself. Brainiac didn't just fight him with kryptonite, the old man said, his voice dropping even lower, thick with memory. That was for amateurs. He synthesized an atmospheric contagion, a microscopic agent that, when inhaled, slowly, systematically converted solar radiation into a crippling poison. Clark grew weaker by the day, but he kept fighting. He kept getting back up, trying to inspire people to the very end. The final blow, it was from a concentrated solar flare, fired from an orbital cannon. He thought it would recharge him. Instead, it finalized the conversion process. He burned from the inside out. The old man's voice was clinical, like a doctor reading a coroner's report, but his white-knuckled grip on his cane betrayed the deep, unhealed wound beneath the surface. Izuku felt a profound sorrow, a grief for a hero he'd never met. He moved to the next case, a knot tightening in his stomach. Here lay a pair of silver bracelets, shattered into pieces. Next to them, a golden lasso, its light now dull and lifeless, lay coiled like a dead snake. Wonder Woman, Izuku whispered, Diana of Themyscira. She was the heart of the League, the old man continued his grim eulogy. Brainiac couldn't break her will, so he broke her spirit. He didn't just send an army, he sent an army of parademons, each one biomechanically grafted with the face and voice of a fallen Amazon sister, crying out her name, begging her to stop. He used her compassion as a weapon against her. She fought for 3 days and 3 nights, never striking a killing blow, trying to save those who were already lost. In the end, she was simply overwhelmed. They broke her. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. He could almost hear it. The cacophony of familiar voices turned into weapons of psychological torture. He felt a phantom ache in his soul. The next alcove. A simple, green ring, cracked down the middle, its light extinguished. It sat on a cushion next to a scorched and battered power lantern. The Green Lanterns. Hal Jordan, John Stewart. Brainiac didn't attack them directly. He sent a logic bomb, a virus of pure mathematics, directly into the central power battery on Oe. It introduced a paradox that the Guardian's own logic couldn't solve. The battery didn't explode, it just turned off. Every Green Lantern in the universe, all at once, their rings dead. Hal was in the middle of containing a collapsing star when his power cut out. He never stood a chance. On and on it went, a litany of failure and loss. The scorched emblem of the Flash, all that was left after he'd been tricked into running into a trap that weaponized the Speed Force itself, causing him to vibrate apart into nothingness. The shattered, 5-pronged trident of Aquaman, recovered from the boiled, poisoned oceans he had died trying to protect. This wasn't a trophy room. It was a mausoleum. A testament to the day hope died. Izuku felt the crushing weight of it all, the sheer, calculated brutality of their enemy. This Brainiac wasn't just a villain, he was an extinction-level event. And you? Izuku finally asked, his voice hoarse. He turned to face the old man. How did you survive? The man offered a bitter, mirthless smile, a slight twitch of his scarred lips. Brainiac's logic was flawless. He analyzed gods, aliens, magic, and metahumans. He calculated every variable, but his calculations had one blind spot. He had no data for a man. A simple, stubborn man driven by nothing more than grief and an obscene amount of money. He tapped his own chest with a trembling finger. I was a rounding error in his equation. I survived because I was already a ghost. I operated from the shadows he couldn't see. By the time his logic identified me as the true strategic linchpin of Earth's defense, it was too late. I had burrowed too deep. He had already won the war, so he left his wardens and moved on to the next world to consume. He left me here to watch the world he broke. Izuku stared at him, at the scars, the cane, the tubes running into his nose. And in a flash of terrible, dawning comprehension, he understood. The cave. The technology. The symbol. The grim, strategic mind. You're him, Izuku breathed, his eyes wide. You're Batman. The old man, Bruce Wayne, gave a slow, tired nod. The name is a relic. A ghost story? Much like the man who wore it. He gestured for Izuku to follow him to the medical bay, a gleaming white alcove near the supercomputer. Your injuries, Bruce stated. They need to be treated. And I need a full diagnostic. Izuku, still reeling, allowed Bruce to guide him to a reclining medical chair. As he sat, various scanners and articulated arms emerged from the walls, casting blue light over him. He felt a slight prick in his arm as a microscopic needle drew a blood sample. On the large holographic screen, his biological data appeared in stunning detail. Extraordinary, Bruce murmured, his eyes scanning the data stream with an intensity that belied his frail state. A unique genetic marker, this quirk factor. And this energy signature. One for all. It's not just your own power. The scan is detecting residual biomarkers of 8 other individuals within your DNA. It's a cumulative power, passed from one person to the next, growing stronger with each generation. He looked at Izuku, a flicker of something new in his eyes, a scientist's fascination. It's a living legacy. The scanners highlighted Izuku's skeleton, marking the dozens of hairline fractures, the previously shattered bones in his arms and legs, all healed with a slight, telltale density that spoke of repeated, catastrophic trauma. You have broken yourself over and over again for this power, Bruce observed, his voice soft. Just to control it. I had to, Izuku said simply. People were counting on me. And that is the crux of the issue, Bruce said, dismissing the medical scanners with a wave of his hand. The articulated arms retracted back into the walls. He fixed Izuku with a piercing gaze, the frail old man gone, replaced by the master interrogator. Why? Why do you do it, Izuku Midoriya? Why do you throw yourself into the fire again and again? Izuku was taken aback. To save people. That's what a hero does, a noble answer. And a naive one, Bruce countered, his voice sharp as broken glass. What if you can't save them? What if, like me, you are forced to stand by and watch them all fall? What if your very presence brings them more harm than good, like the family you encountered tonight? When the cost becomes too high, when hope is a demonstrable fallacy, what then? This was a test. Izuku knew it. A test of his spirit. He thought of his own world, of Shigaraki's nihilism, of the despair that had almost consumed society. He thought of his friends who had pulled him back from the brink. Then you get back up, Izuku said, his voice quiet but unwavering. He met Bruce's gaze, his own green eyes burning with a conviction that had been forged in the fires of his own war. You save the ones you can. You don't give up. Ever. Because the moment a hero gives up is the moment the villains have truly won. Hope isn't a fallacy. It's a choice. It's the last thing to die. A long silence hung between them. The only sound was the roar of the waterfall. Bruce Wayne stared at him, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Izuku thought he saw the icy facade crack, revealing a flicker of the man he once was. The man who had befriended a god from Kansas. The man who had fought alongside an Amazon princess. Finally, Bruce broke the silence. For 10 years, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of every one of those years, I have lived in this tomb, kept alive by machines and sheer, bitter stubbornness. I have watched this world suffocate. Brainiac didn't just kill the heroes. He left behind a parting gift. He gestured to the main computer. The screen changed, displaying a complex schematic of a planet-sized device. He called it the Nexus Core, a terraforming engine and data assimilation device, buried deep within the planet's mantle. The League died trying to stop it. All they could do was delay its activation sequence. For 10 years, I have been fighting a losing battle against its systems, delaying it further, buying time. Time for what? Izuku asked. For a contingency, Bruce said. For a miracle. For you. He looked at the screen, a grim finality in his eyes. I'm out of time. My countermeasures are failing. The core's activation sequence has begun its final initiation. In less than 1 week, it will come online. It will systematically atomize every living thing on this planet, absorb every scrap of data from our civilization, our art, our history, our science, our memories, and then transmit that data package to Brainiac's fleet before rendering the Earth a sterile, barren rock. Izuku felt a cold dread grip him. It was a doomsday clock. My body is broken, Bruce continued, a coughing fit shaking his frail frame. My will is all I have left, and it's not enough to pilot a machine into the planet's core. I needed a successor, someone with the power to withstand the journey, the strength to destroy the core, and the will to see it through. His piercing eyes locked onto Izuku's. I needed a hero. He turned and shuffled towards the center of the main platform, the place where his vehicle had rested. He pressed a sequence of commands into a panel that rose from the floor. With a deep hum of powerful machinery, a large circular section of the platform descended, then rose again, carrying a new pedestal. On the pedestal, encased in a shimmering, blue energy field, was a suit of armor. Izuku gasped. It was breathtaking. A masterpiece of menacing, functional art. It was undeniably a bath suit, but it was unlike any he had ever imagined. It was sleeker, more advanced than the one in the memorial case. Forged from overlapping plates of a dark, charcoal gray metal that seemed to shift in the light, it was built for a metahuman physique, with thicker armor and more pronounced musculature. Woven into the fabric between the plates were faint, intricate lines that pulsed with a soft, internal light. The cowl was sharp and aggressive, the ears slightly longer, more predatory. The symbol on the chest was a larger, more stylized bat, its edges sharp as blades. The Mark X, Bruce said, his voice filled with a strange, paternal pride. The legacy suit. I've been building it for a decade, using every last resource I had. The armor plates are a composite, woven with salvaged nth metal from a Thanagarian cruiser. It's virtually indestructible and has energy-dampening properties. The undersuit is lined with a micron weave of my own invention, designed to support a body under extreme physical stress. But these, he pointed to the glowing lines, are its most important feature. They are energy regulation and dispersal channels. I designed them after analyzing the data logs from the Flash's suit. They are meant to safely channel and vent massive, uncontrolled bursts of kinetic and bioelectric energy. He looked at Izuku. Energy like your one for all. With this suit, you could potentially access your full power, 100%, without turning your body to dust. It won't be painless, but it will be survivable. He reached out a trembling hand and touched the energy field. It dissolved with a soft hum. It is also fully integrated with the Bat computer's AI. It will provide you with my strategic databases, the combined combat knowledge of the entire Justice League, threat analysis, life support, everything you need. It was my life's last project, my final contingency. Izuku stared at the suit, overwhelmed. It was the most incredible piece of technology he had ever seen. It was a lifeline. It was a chance. But it was also a coffin, a burden, a mantle of impossible weight. I can't, Izuku whispered, shaking his head. I'm not Batman. I know, Bruce said, his voice softening for the first time. He took a shuffling step closer, his eyes pleading. I told you, the world doesn't need a Batman anymore. It doesn't need vengeance. It doesn't need a ghost haunted by the past. He looked at the memorials, at the ghosts that lined his cave and his soul. They were symbols. Clark was the symbol of hope. Diana was the symbol of truth. They inspired people to be better, but symbols can be broken. Theirs were. He turned back to Izuku, his expression one of immense, soul-crushing weariness. But hope can be rekindled. It needs a spark. You, Izuku Midoriya, your spirit, it's the same fire I saw in them, before the world broke them. You have a power greater than any of them, combined with a heart that refuses to surrender to despair. Suddenly a loud, urgent alarm blared from the medical monitors Bruce had been hooked up to before. Red lights flashed across the screen, displaying a flatlining EKG. Bruce staggered, his hand flying to his chest. He gasped, a pained, wet sound. The life support systems integrated into his robes were failing. His time was up. Sir! A calm, synthetic voice echoed through the cave, the AI. Vital signs are critical. Cardiac arrest imminent. Bruce waved a dismissive hand, leaning heavily on the pedestal of the new suit. He looked at Izuku, his eyes blazing with a final, desperate urgency. The suit. Put it on, he rasped, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The AI will guide you. Barbara, find Barbara, she will help. The clock tower. He pitched forward, and Izuku lunged, catching the frail old man before he could hit the ground. He was shockingly light, a collection of bone and regret. Izuku gently lowered him to the floor, his mind reeling. No, hold on, Izuku said, panic rising in his voice. He looked around wildly. The medical bay. We can help you. Bruce gripped Izuku's arm with surprising strength. He pulled him closer, his face inches away. The fire in his eyes was fading, replaced by a deep, final peace. It's over for me, son, he whispered. My war is over. He looked past Izuku, at the red cape of Superman. I'm going to see my friends. My parents. My boy. A single tear traced a path through the grime and scars on his cheek. He looked back at Izuku, his focus absolute. Don't be me, he commanded with his last ounce of strength. Don't be vengeance. Be better. His grip loosened. The light in his pale blue eyes extinguished. The last breath rattled from his chest, and was lost in the eternal roar of the waterfall. Bruce Wayne was dead. Izuku Midoriya knelt there on the cold metal floor of the Batcave, holding the body of the last hero of this fallen world. The alarms from the medical bay fell silent, leaving only the sound of the cascading water. He was alone. Utterly and completely alone, in a dead man's tomb, surrounded by the ghosts of legends. He looked from Bruce's peaceful, lifeless face to the magnificent, terrifying suit standing on the pedestal above them. It waited for him, a silent promise of power and a curse of unbearable responsibility. The Nexus Core was waking up. The world was ending. And the last will and testament of the Batman was a single, impossible mission, left to a boy from another world. He gently laid Bruce's head on the ground. He stood up, his body aching, his heart shattered, his soul weighed down by the legacy of an entire pantheon of dead gods. He looked at the legacy suit, its dark form a silhouette against the cave's light. Hope wasn't a fallacy, he had told Bruce. It was a choice, and now, in the deepest, darkest hole at the end of the world, he had to choose to become that hope. Silence. It was a different kind of silence from the one that had blanketed the city streets. The oppressive, fearful quiet of the world above was replaced here by a deep, reverent stillness, a silence that felt ancient and sacred. It was broken only by the eternal, rhythmic roar of the waterfall, a sound like the world's own heartbeat, and the soft, almost imperceptible hum of dormant technology. Izuku knelt on the cold metal floor, the body of Bruce Wayne growing cool in his arms. The reality of the situation washed over him in sickening, icy waves. He was stranded. He was in another universe, and the only person who understood, the only person who could have been his guide, had died in his arms, leaving him with a ghost's mission and a world to save. A wave of despair, sharp and debilitating, threatened to drown him. He was a teenager. A student. He was just a boy from Muzidafu who had been given a power he was still learning to control. He looked at the memorial cases lining the cavern wall, the shredded cape of Superman, the shattered bracelets of Wonder Woman. Gods had fallen here. Legends had been broken. What was he, in the face of the foe that had vanquished them? An insect. A rounding error, as Bruce had said. He felt a tremor run through his own body, a sob catching in his throat. He thought of his mother, of the promise he made to come back to her safe. He thought of All Might, his mentor, whose own body had been a ruin but whose smile had held up the world. He thought of Uraraka, of Ada, of Todoroki, his friends, his pillars, the ones who had pulled him back from his own solitary darkness. Their faces flashed in his mind, clear and painful, phantoms from a world he might never see again. He was truly, utterly alone. "Sir?" The voice, calm, synthesized, and with a flawless British accent, echoed softly through the cavern. It emanated from a speaker panel near the central computer. Izuku flinched, looking up from Bruce's lifeless face. "Mr. Wayne's biological signs have ceased," the voice stated, with a tone of clinical, programmed finality. "Life support protocols have been terminated. Shall I initiate the last son contingency?" Izuku stared blankly at the speaker. He didn't understand. "What? Who are you?" "I am the artificial intelligence network integrated into this facility, and its assets," the voice explained patiently. "My operational designation is the Alfred Protocol. I was designed by Mr. Wayne to manage the Batcave, provide strategic support, and assist his successor should the need arise." There was a pause, a programmed hesitation that felt remarkably human. "My apologies for your loss. Master Bruce was a remarkable man." The designation Master Bruce was delivered with a hint of something that, had it been a human voice, would have been deep affection. It cracked Izuku's fragile composure. He wasn't entirely alone. A ghost of a ghost remained. "What do I do?" Izuku asked, his voice a choked whisper. He looked down at the body. "I can't just leave him." "Of course not, sir," the Alfred AI replied. Master Bruce was a pragmatist, but he understood the importance of ritual. His final instructions for this eventuality are clear. There is a stasis crypt, prepared within the western alcove. A place of honor, befitting his station. Guided by soft lights that illuminated a path along the metal causeway, Izuku gently lifted Bruce Wayne's body. He was terrifyingly light, a testament to his long illness. He carried him past the silent, watching memorials of his fallen friends, his comrades in arms. It felt like a funeral procession of one, a final, lonely walk for the man who had outlived them all. The crypt was a simple, elegant slab of polished obsidian. As Izuku approached, a section of the rock face slid away, revealing a chamber bathed in a soft, blue light. He carefully laid Bruce inside. The old man's face, in death, had lost its hard, weary lines. He looked, for the first time since Izuku had seen him, at peace. As if a burden carried for a lifetime had finally been set down. "Goodbye, Bruce Wayne," Izuku whispered, the name feeling foreign and momentous on his tongue. "Thank you." He stepped back, and the stone slab slid silently shut, entombing the last son of Gotham in the heart of his own sanctuary. The cave felt larger now, emptier. The torch had been passed, whether he was ready for it or not. He stood there for an unknown amount of time, simply breathing. The Alfred AI remained silent, granting him the space for his grief. But the doomsday clock Bruce had spoken of was ticking in the back of his mind. Less than a week. Finally, he turned back to the central platform. "Alfred?" he called out, his voice stronger now, laced with a new, grim resolve. "At your service, sir," the AI responded instantly. "Bruce. Mr. Wayne, he said you could guide me. I need to understand everything." "Very good, sir. I would recommend we begin with the archives. A full tactical briefing on the fall and the current geopolitical landscape is necessary if you are to operate effectively. For the next several hours, or was it days? Time was a meaningless concept in the timeless cave. Izuku was immersed in the history of this world's end. He sat before the massive holographic display of the Bat computer, as the Alfred AI walked him through the apocalypse. It was worse than he could have possibly imagined. He didn't just get a summary, he saw it. He watched archival news footage from a decade ago, the screen showing a handsome, smiling Clark Kent reporting from Metropolis, the picture of calm. Then, the first reports of an object entering the solar system. The initial confusion, followed by dawning horror. He saw the first battle, the Justice League assembling in orbit to meet a vast, skull-shaped ship, their powers a brilliant, defiant display against the cold, dark void. They seemed invincible. Then he saw Brainiac's strategy unfold. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare and brutal, logical efficiency. He saw footage from a Green Lantern's body camera as his ring sputtered and died in the middle of a fight. He saw satellite imagery of the world's oceans boiling as Aquaman fought a losing battle against planet-scale water purifiers that were converting the seas to a toxic sludge. He saw the Watchtower, their magnificent orbital sanctuary, crippled by a logic bomb and sent plummeting into the Pacific. The AI showed him civilian logs, social media feeds that went from hopeful posts about Superman to panicked, terrified messages, and then, finally, to silence. He saw the world's governments and armies dismantled in hours. It wasn't a war, it was a harvest, and then came the aftermath. The rise of the wardens, regional governors appointed from Brainiac's remaining high-level enforcers, the establishment of the tithe, a system of resource collection that kept the populace weak and compliant. He saw files detailing the suppression of art, of music, of any gathering that could foster community or hope. Brainiac hadn't just conquered the world. He had lobotomized its spirit. Why? Izuku asked, staring at a map of Gotham, divided into sectors, each with a designated warden and a weekly tithe quota. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just take what he wanted and leave? Brainiac's primary function is the acquisition and preservation of knowledge, Alfred explained, displaying a file on the alien intelligence. But to him, knowledge is a finite resource. By destroying the civilization, he ensures its knowledge is unique, a perfect specimen to be added to his collection. He isn't a conqueror, Agent M. He is a collector, and we are merely butterflies to be pinned in his album. Agent M? Izuku questioned, latching onto the strange designation. My apologies. It is the operative designation Master Bruce assigned to his theoretical successor. M for Midoriya. He felt that the name Batman should be retired with him. He believed his methods, born of vengeance and darkness, were a tool for a specific time. A time that is now over. He wanted you to be something else. Don't be vengeance. Be better. Bruce's last words echoed in his mind. He felt a profound sense of inadequacy. He watched Batman's own logs, videos of him moving through the shadows during the invasion, coordinating the heroes, exploiting weaknesses, thinking 10 steps ahead of everyone. The sheer, breathtaking genius of the man was on full display. Bruce Wayne had no powers, but his mind was a weapon more potent than any quirk Izuku had ever seen, and this was the man he was supposed to succeed. I can't do this, Izuku said, slumping in the chair. I'm not a genius. I'm not a god. My power. I break myself just using it. I'm a brawler. A hammer. Everything I just saw, it requires a scalpel. A hammer can be taught to strike with precision, sir, the AI replied, a surprising warmth in its synthesized tone. Master Bruce did not choose you for your intellect. He did not choose you for your power alone. I have analyzed his final logs. He chose you for your spirit. He registered your emotional response during your first encounter in the alley, empathy, outrage, a compulsive need to protect. These are qualities that cannot be programmed. He believed that your heart, when guided by his methods and technology, would create a hero more complete than he ever was. The words resonated, stirring the embers of resolve in his soul. He had been chosen. He couldn't let that choice, Bruce's final act of hope, be in vain. He stood up and walked to the center of the cave, to the pedestal where the legacy suit waited. Okay, Alfred, he said, his voice firm. Let's get to work. Putting on the suit was a strange and solemn ritual. It began with the undersuit, a thin, black material that clung to him like a second skin. The moment it sealed, he felt a faint tingle as its microscopic sensors mapped to his nervous system. Then came the armor. Guided by the AI, he stepped onto the platform, and articulated arms emerged, fitting the nth metal composite plates onto his body with a series of satisfying, solid clicks. The greaves on his legs, the armored gauntlets, the solid chest piece emblazoned with the new, sharp-edged bat symbol. Each piece added weight, a physical representation of the burden he was accepting. Finally, one of the arms presented the cowl. He took it in his hands. It was heavier than he expected. He looked into its cold, white, unblinking lenses. This was the face of fear. The face of the night. He hesitated for a long moment, then took a deep breath and pulled it over his head. his world changed. The moment the cowl sealed at the neck, his senses were both dampened and magnified. The roar of the waterfall became a distant, managed hum. His own breathing was a clear, steady sound in his ears, filtered and clean. And his vision, his normal vision, was replaced by the heads-up display. A cascade of crystalline blue data scrolled into existence at the periphery of his vision. In the top left, a real-time display of his own vitals, heart rate, body temperature, respiration. Next to it, a power gauge showing the level of 1 for all he was currently channeling, a dormant 0%. In the top right, a chronometer and a link to the cave's systems. A mini-map of the cavern bloomed into existence at the bottom. "Welcome online, Agent M," Alfred's voice said, now speaking directly inside his head through the cowl's internal comms. "All systems nominal. Neural interface synced." "How do you feel?" Heavy, Izuku replied, his voice slightly distorted by the cowl's modulator, deeper and more gravelly. He took a step, the weight of the suit forcing a more deliberate, powerful stride. And blind, his peripheral vision was gone, replaced by data. It was like looking at the world through a tunnel. "A common first impression, sir," Alfred noted. "You are accustomed to relying on your natural senses. The cowl's function is to replace them with superior, technologically aided perception. Observe." A command from Alfred caused the white lenses to polarize. Suddenly Izuku's vision zoomed in on a small, insignificant rock near the waterfall, hundreds of feet away, the image perfectly stable and crystal clear. He could see the water droplets striking its surface. "Multispectrum visual analysis is also available," Alfred continued. "Thermal, electromagnetic, X-ray. You will learn to see the world not as it is, but as a collection of data to be interpreted." It is how he saw it. Izuku took a few more steps, moving around the platform. He felt clumsy, a child wearing his father's armor. It was alien. Restrictive. He felt the urge to just activate 1 for all and leap to the ceiling, to shatter the feeling of confinement. As if sensing his thoughts, Alfred interjected. "A word of caution, Agent M. The suit is designed to handle extreme energy outputs, but it requires you to be deliberate. A sudden, untethered burst of your power could overload the initial dampeners. You must learn to work with the suit, not against it. It is a symbiotic relationship." Izuku nodded, calming himself. He had to relearn everything. How to move. How to see. How to fight. "The Nexus Core is our priority," Izuku said, focusing on the mission. "But I can't just sit here for a week. People are suffering up there. Like that family. Like the people the thugs from the warehouse were robbing." "An astute observation," Alfred said. "A field test is logical. It will allow you to acclimate to the suit's systems and will provide us an opportunity to re-establish a heroic presence in the city, however small. The psychological impact of your appearance could be a valuable asset." The AI's use of "we" was not lost on Izuku. He wasn't entirely alone in this. "I am detecting a situation developing in the industrial sector," Alfred reported, a new window opening on his HUD, displaying a blueprint of a warehouse district. "A known crew of scavengers, led by a low-level enforcer named Jawbreaker, is attempting to breach a secure medical depot. The depot contains the last city-managed stockpile of broad-spectrum antibiotics and nutrient gels. A valuable target. Let's go," Izuku said, the command feeling more natural this time. "The vehicle you arrived in, the Nightcrawler, is ready. It is the most efficient method of transport." This time, as he sat in the vehicle's cockpit, the world wasn't dark. The Nightcrawler's forward view was streamed directly to his HUD, a panoramic, 360-degree view of the tunnel as they sped through it, overlaid with tactical data. He felt less like a passenger and more like the machine's nerve center. They emerged into a different part of Gotham, a place of rusting factories and skeletal cranes clawing at the perpetually dark sky. The Nightcrawler came to a stop a block away from the target depot, its humming engine dying down into a silent standby mode. "Visuals established," Alfred said, patching his HUD into a series of rooftop drones Bruce had left scattered across the city. He could see the warehouse from multiple angles. 6 hostiles. They were using a heavy plasma torch to cut through the main loading bay door. They were armed with repurposed industrial tools and a few energy pistols. Izuku's mind immediately went to his old tactics. Okay, 6 guys. I can get on the roof, black whip 2 of them, crash through the skylight, and use a 5% Detroit smash to knock the rest of them out with the air pressure alone. Quick. Efficient. A frontal assault would be tactically unsound, Agent M. Alfred's voice cut through his planning, calm and corrective. The structural integrity of the roof is compromised. A high-impact entry risks bringing it down on the supplies you wish to protect. Furthermore, the energy discharge from your attack would be detected by the local warden's scanners, ensuring a swift and overwhelming response. We are not a force of nature. We are a rumor. A shadow. Izuku clenched his fists, frustrated. So what do I do? Stand here and watch? Negative, Alfred replied. We adapt. We utilize the environment and your new assets. Your suit is equipped with a sound-dampening field and its surface can mimic the ambient light, rendering you nearly invisible in the shadows. Your primary entry point should be the ventilation shaft on the western wall. From there, you can proceed unseen. It was the opposite of everything he knew. He wasn't the charging knight. He was the creeping dread. Gritting his teeth, Izuku slipped out of the night crawler. He activated the stealth systems as instructed. The faint pulse of light in the suit's channels died, and he felt a strange field envelop him, muffling the sound of his armored boots on the wet asphalt. He was a ghost. He reached the warehouse wall and located the vent. It was 20 feet up. His instinct was to jump. Deliberate, he reminded himself. He reached for one of the pouches on his utility belt. Alfred's voice calmly identified its contents. Grapnel launcher. Mark IV. High-tension line, silent motor. He aimed, fired, and a thin, strong line shot out, the grapple biting securely into the metal housing of the vent. With a soft whir, it pulled him upwards, smooth and silent. He pried the vent cover off and slipped inside, the darkness of the shaft absolute. Engaging thermal vision, Alfred said. His world turned to a shifting landscape of blues, yellows, and reds. He could see the heat signatures of the thugs through the metal ducts, clustered around the door. He could also see the network of pipes and beams above them. He moved through the ventilation system, his every move a conscious, controlled effort. He emerged onto a high catwalk that ran the length of the warehouse interior. Below, the thugs had just breached the door. Their leader, a brute with a metal jaw that gave him his name, barked orders. Grab the meds first. The nutrient packs are heavy. We get those on the second run. Izuku crouched on the catwalk, his heart pounding. The old him would have announced his presence. The new him just watched, and listened to the voice in his head. The leader, Jawbreaker, is psychologically dominant but tactically inept, Alfred analyzed, highlighting the man in red on Izuku's display. His authority is based on physical strength. Neutralize him first, and the rest will lose cohesion. The 2 guards by the door have substandard energy pistols. Their power cells are running low, judging by the flicker rate. They are the primary range threat. Eliminate them next. It was cold. Calculated. Inhuman. But it was also, undeniably effective. Nightwing Combat File 7B is recommended, Alfred suggested. Focus on non-lethal joint manipulation and disorientation. Izuku took a deep breath. Okay. Be the shadow. He dropped from the catwalk, the suit's systems absorbing the impact, landing behind a tall stack of crates without a sound. He was 20 feet from the nearest thug. He crept forward. The first target was a thug stuffing antibiotics into a sack. Izuku was on him before he could turn. He didn't punch. He moved like a dancer, a blur of controlled motion. A sharp, precise strike to the side of the man's knee buckled his leg. As he fell, Izuku spun, catching his head and guiding it to a gentle, but firm, impact with the concrete floor. The man was unconscious before he knew he was attacked. One down. The second, one of the pistol wielders, heard a faint scuff. He turned, raising his weapon. Izuku was already there. He slapped the gun aside, the move fluid and practiced as though he'd done it 1,000 times, a gift from the suit's combat files. He grabbed the man's arm, twisted, and a sharp jab to a pressure point in his neck caused his eyes to roll back. 2 down. The others were alerted now. Hey! What the? Smoke pellet, left pouch, Alfred advised calmly. Izuku threw it. A thick gray smoke instantly filled the area, sowing confusion. Switching to thermal, Izuku commanded, the words feeling more natural now. Through the smoke, the thugs were glowing, panicked outlines. He moved among them like a phantom predator. A swift kick here. A disabling nerve strike there. He used their confusion against them, making them think he was everywhere at once. It was brutally efficient. Finally, only Jawbreaker was left. The big man roared, swinging a massive pipe wrench wildly in the clearing smoke. Show yourself, coward! Izuku dropped from a stack of crates behind him. Jawbreaker spun around, his metal jaw unhinged in a snarl. He charged. Izuku stood his ground. He could have met the charge with a 5% smash that would have sent the man through the wall. He could have ended it in an instant, but he heard Bruce's voice. Be better, he heard Alfred's. Precision. As Jawbreaker swung the wrench, Izuku sidestepped with a dancer's grace. He grabbed the thug's outstretched arm, used his momentum against him, and spun him around, locking his arm behind his back. With a final, precise application of pressure, he forced the larger man to his knees, defeated and helpless. The entire fight had lasted 30 seconds, and the loudest sound had been Jawbreaker's own furious roar. He secured the unconscious thugs with zip cuffs from his belt. The fight was over. He hadn't broken a single bone, not his own, not theirs. He hadn't destroyed a single crate of supplies. He just stood there, his breathing steady, the silence of the warehouse settling around him. It was then he heard a small whimper. Tucked behind a forklift on the far side of the depot were two figures. A man in a warehouse worker's uniform and a little girl, no older than 7, clutching his leg. They were staring at him, their eyes wide. But it wasn't the same terror he had seen in the family from the alley. It was fear, yes, but it was mixed with something else. Confusion. He approached them slowly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. The suit's modulator made his voice deep, but he tried to keep his tone gentle. It's over. You're safe. The man flinched but didn't run. He held his daughter tighter. Izuku knelt down, a difficult maneuver in the heavy armor. He noticed a gash on the man's arm, from where he must have hidden himself. Without thinking, he opened a pouch on his belt, took out a small med pack, a self-applying disinfectant and biosealant, and offered it to him. The man stared at the med pack as if it were a priceless jewel. He took it with a trembling hand. Thank you, he stammered. The little girl peeked out from behind her father's leg. She wasn't looking at the suit with terror. She was looking at the glowing green symbol on Izuku's chest, the only part of him that was his own, a tribute to his own world symbol of peace, integrated into the bat. What are you? The girl whispered, her voice filled with childlike wonder. Izuku looked from the girl to the unconscious thugs, to the saved medical supplies. He hadn't brought destruction. He hadn't drawn the wrath of the wardens. He had been a silent guardian. A protector. He had been a hero in a way this world could accept. In a way it desperately needed. He didn't have an answer for the little girl. He was not Batman. He was not yet the Emerald Knight. He was just Izuku Midoriya. And for the first time since arriving in this broken world, standing in the shadows of a Gotham warehouse, he felt a tiny, fragile spark ignite in the darkness. It was hope. And he had just planted the first seed. The Batcave had become Izuku's entire world. A universe contained within a cavern, where the only sun was the cool, blue-white light of the Batcomputer's holographic displays, and the only stars were the illuminated memorials of fallen heroes. Time had lost all meaning. He operated on a cycle of training, study, and brief, dreamless periods of sleep on a cot in the medical bay. Each waking moment was a race against the silent, ticking clock of the Nexus core. The victory in the warehouse felt like a lifetime ago. A single flickering candle in a hurricane of darkness. It had proven the concept, that he could operate in this new, stealthy paradigm, but it had done nothing to solve the larger, planet-killing problem. It is a single victory, Agent M, the Alfred AI's voice stated in his cowl as he returned to the cave, the Nightcrawler docking with silent precision. It does not win the war. But it is a start. Your acclimation to the suit's primary systems is proceeding at a rate 17% faster than projected. It still feels wrong, Izuku confessed, pulling off the heavy cowl. The familiar, humid air of the cave was a relief after the sterile, filtered environment of the suit. Hiding. Sticking to the shadows. It's not what a hero is supposed to do. A hero is supposed to succeed, sir, Alfred countered gently. The methodology is secondary to the outcome. Master Bruce understood that better than anyone. Izuku sighed, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. All right, Alfred. The field test is over. Let's get back to it. The Nexus Core. Bruce's files. He spent the next cycle in front of the main console, the Alfred AI projecting Bruce's research into the cavernous air. It was a maddening, chaotic mess. Not disorganized, but deliberately, almost pathologically, compartmentalized. It was a digital maze, a reflection of a mind that trusted no one and planned for every conceivable betrayal, even from his own systems. There were fragments of schematics, isolated lines of alien code, audio logs that cut off mid-sentence, and layers upon layers of encryption, each more complex than the last. Many of the files were protected by digital booby traps, logic bombs and deletion viruses that Alfred had to painstakingly neutralize. He was falling apart, Izuku murmured, looking at a corrupted data file that seemed to be written in 3 different coding languages at once. His mind remained sharp to the very end, Alfred corrected, but he was working under unimaginable pressure, against an intelligence far superior to his own. He was not merely hiding his research from Brainiac's potential observation. He was hiding it from himself, creating firewalls between his own thoughts to prevent a single point of failure. It is a brilliant, but deeply fractured, methodology. It's impossible, Izuku said, slumping in the chair, the weight of the task pressing down on him. We'll never get through this in time. Not alone, we won't, the AI agreed. Decrypting this level of personalized, chaotic encryption requires more than just processing power. It requires a specific type of genius, a cryptanalyst who can not only break codes, but understand the labyrinthine psychology of the man who created them. Is there anyone like that left? Izuku asked, his hope dwindling. Master Bruce believed so, Alfred replied. The main screen flickered, replacing the jumble of code with a personnel file. A vibrant, smiling young woman with fiery red hair filled the screen. She was wearing a sleek, dark costume with a yellow bat emblem, her expression full of life and daring. The name on the file read Batgirl. Status, active pre-fall. Then the image changed. It became a medical report. A single, catastrophic spinal cord injury. A grainy security still of a man with a horrifying rictus grin, holding a pistol. The word paralyzed was stamped across the file in red. The screen changed again. The young woman was gone, replaced by a shadowy, anonymous icon, a stylized eye. The designation read Oracle. The status was a single, cryptic word, active. Barbara Gordon, Alfred said. Daughter of Police Commissioner James Gordon. One of Master Bruce's first and most trusted protégés. After her injury, she refused to surrender. She reinvented herself. She became Oracle, the information nerve center for the entire hero community. Her intellect, in the digital realm, was a superpower in its own right. She saw everything. Knew everything. She was the team's guardian angel. The final image appeared. It was a recent surveillance photo, taken by one of Bruce's drones. A woman, now in her late 30s, her red hair streaked with gray. The fire in her eyes had been banked, replaced by a hard, weary cynicism. The lines on her face spoke of a decade of loss and lonely survival. She sat in a high-tech chair, surrounded by a fortress of monitors. Bruce's last words, Izuku remembered, his voice a whisper. Find Barbara. The clock tower. Indeed, Alfred confirmed. 10 days before his passing, Master Bruce sent a single, heavily encrypted data burst from this terminal. It contained no message, only a complex authentication key, a digital handshake. The destination was a heavily shielded, untraceable server located in the spire of the old Gotham clock tower. He was reaching out to her. I believe he was attempting to coordinate a final effort. She's our only hope, then, Izuku said, standing up, a new sense of purpose solidifying his resolve. Take me there. The journey to Old Gotham was a descent into a different kind of urban grave. The industrial sector had been a place of rust and function. This was a place of forgotten beauty. The architecture was majestic, neo-Gothic cathedrals and grand, stone-faced municipal buildings, now covered in ivy and grime. The streets were narrower, paved with cobblestones that were being reclaimed by weeds. It felt like a fairy tale kingdom that had been put to sleep 100 years ago and never woken up. This was once the heart of the city, Alfred's voice narrated in his cowl, overlaying his vision with ghostly images of what the streets used to look like: throngs of people, bright lights from theaters, the bustle of life. Now, it is a dead zone. The wardens rarely patrol here. There are too few resources to tithe, and the dense infrastructure makes drone surveillance difficult. An ideal location for a holdout. The clock tower loomed ahead of them, a black, skeletal finger pointing at the perpetually bruised sky. From a distance, it looked as derelict as the surrounding buildings, but as the nightcrawler approached, Izuku's enhanced vision picked up the details. The magnificent clock face was protected by plates of what looked like ballistic polymer. The ornate windows of the belfry were replaced with armored shutters. A host of strange, jury-rigged antennae and satellite dishes sprouted from the roof like metallic weeds. It was a fortress disguised as a ruin. Izuku exited the nightcrawler a block away, melting into the deep shadows. How do I get in? Knocking doesn't seem like an option. Use the handshake key Master Bruce created, Alfred instructed. I will transmit it via a tight-beam signal from your suit's comms when you are at the main door. If she is there, and if she is willing, she will recognize his digital signature. He approached the massive, oak doors at the base of the tower. They were reinforced with strips of steel. He stood before them, feeling small and exposed. Okay, Alfred. Do it. He waited. For a long moment, nothing happened. He wondered if anyone was even inside. Maybe she had left years ago. Maybe she was. A sharp click echoed from the door, and a thin, blue line of light scanned him from head to toe. It was fast, efficient, and far more advanced than the crude tech of the street thugs. A voice, sharp and female, crackled from a hidden speaker. It was distorted, but held a clear, no-nonsense edge. You're not Bruce. No, Izuku replied, his own voice modulated by the cowl. He's gone. Another long pause. The silence stretched, thick with suspicion. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. He sent you, the voice stated, a hint of resignation in her tone. The sound of multiple, heavy locks disengaging echoed from within. Get in, before one of the warden's patrol spiders spots you standing out there like a monument to bad decisions. The heavy doors swung inward on silent, well-oiled hinges, revealing a passage into darkness. Izuku slipped inside, and the doors sealed behind him, plunging him into utter blackness before emergency lights flickered on, casting a low, red glow. He was in a small, reinforced antechamber. Ahead of him was a heavy-duty freight elevator. The door slid open, an unspoken invitation. He stepped inside, and it began a slow, grinding ascent. When the doors opened again, he was met with a breathtaking sight. He was in the clock's belfry, a massive, circular room. The four giant faces of the clock were blacked out, but the space behind them was alive. It was a technological spider's web, a defiant hub of light and information in a dead world. Dozens of monitors of varying sizes were mounted on custom-built racks, displaying scrolling lines of code, satellite maps, news feeds from around the globe, and complex schematics. Cables snaked across the floor and ceiling like thick vines, all leading to a central command console that sat like a throne in the middle of the room. And in that throne, a sleek, high-tech mobility chair, sat the woman from the surveillance photo. Barbara Gordon was pale and thin, but there was an intensity about her that made her seem larger than life. Her red hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore a simple gray shirt and cargo pants. Her eyes, a startlingly bright blue, were fixed on him, narrowed in sharp, analytical assessment. They were eyes that had seen too much. Take the mask off, she commanded, her voice crisp and authoritative. I don't talk to symbols. I've had enough of them to last a lifetime. Izuku hesitated for a second, then reached up and removed the cowl. The cool air of the belfry washed over his face. He stood there, a green-haired, freckled teenager in a suit of terrifying armor. Barbara's expression didn't soften. Izuku Midoriya. Quirk, one for all. Native to her 7849, she said, her fingers flying across a keyboard. His own file, more detailed than Alfred's, appeared on her main screen. I saw your energy signature tear a hole in reality the second you arrived. I saw Bruce pick you up from that alley. I was tracking the whole thing. You knew? Izuku asked, surprised. I make it my business to know everything that happens in this city, she retorted, her voice sharp. It's the only way I've stayed alive this long. I also know that Bruce is dead. I felt his personal biomonitor go offline 3 days ago. So let me guess. He found his miracle replacement, gave you the world-is-ending speech, pointed you at the Nexus core, and then did the one thing he was ever truly good at, leaving his soldiers to fight a war he couldn't finish. Her words were brutal, laced with a bitterness so profound it was almost a physical force. He saved my life, Izuku said defensively. He gave me a mission. A chance to save this world. Barbara let out a short, harsh laugh, devoid of any humor. A chance to die, you mean? Kid, do you have any idea what you've walked into? This isn't one of your comic book stories where the new hero shows up and saves the day. This is the epilogue. The story is over. The good guys lost. She wheeled her chair closer, her gaze intense. I was Oracle. I wasn't just on the comms. I was the central nervous system of the entire Justice League. I had a direct line to every single member. I heard them die, kid. In real time. I heard Superman choke on sunshine while trying to tell the people of Metropolis not to lose hope. I heard Diana scream for her Amazon sisters as she was torn apart. I heard Hal's last, confused whisper as his ring died in the heart of a star. I listened to my friends, my family, be systematically, logically, and brutally extinguished, and I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Her pain was a cold, hard armor she wore. So you'll forgive me if I'm not impressed by a new cape showing up, she continued, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. All you are is a ghost, a reminder of a hope that got every single person I ever cared about killed. The fight is over. The world has moved on. All you're doing is poking the corpse and wondering why it stinks. Then why are you still here? Izuku challenged, his own conviction rising to meet her despair. Why this fortress? Why monitor everything if the fight is over? Because someone has to keep the lights on. She snapped, gesturing to the screens around them. Someone has to run the survivor networks, warn people about warden patrols, keep the last free libraries of human knowledge from being wiped out by Brainiac's data scrubbers. I'm not a hero anymore. I'm a librarian at the end of the universe. I'm preserving what's left. You want to start a new war. A war you cannot possibly win. And you'll just get more people killed. She turned her back to him, her shoulders slumping. Leave. Go find a hole and pull it in after you. It's the only way to survive. Bruce should have learned that. A klaxon, loud and shrill, suddenly blared through the clock tower. It was a sound of pure panic. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in an infernal glow. What is that? Izuku asked, instinctively reaching for his cowl. Barbara's head snapped up, her eyes wide with genuine shock. That's impossible. That's a perimeter alarm I haven't heard in 10 years. It's the anti-intrusion protocol, the one designed to detect corrupted Justice League tech. On her main screen, a security feed from the base of the tower showed the massive oak door glowing red-hot before being blasted inward, reduced to splinters. A figure stepped through the breach. It was not a man. It was not a machine. It was a horrific fusion of both. It stood over 7 feet tall, its body a sleek chassis of the same polished, alien metal as Brainiac's ship, but interwoven with pulsing, purple organic tissue. Its head was a smooth, metallic cowl with a single, glowing red optic in the center. It had no mouth, no face. It carried no weapon. Its arms ended in long, multi-jointed claws that crackled with energy. It moved with an unnatural, silent grace, a predator built for sterilization. Hostile designation, Warden, Class 7 Interdictor. Alfred's voice spoke urgently in Izuku's mind as he pulled the cowl on. A hunter-killer unit. Designed to purge rogue data nodes and high-level resistance. Its presence here is not a coincidence. Probing Master Bruce's files must have tripped a deep-level silent alarm. It has been hunting us. This is my fault, Izuku realized with a sickening lurch. I let it here. The warden was already ascending, not using the elevator, but scaling the interior shaft with its claws, gouging deep rents in the stone. Barbara, get back! Izuku yelled, his modulated voice booming in the chamber. He didn't wait for a response. He moved, shoving her entire command console, and her with it, towards the far side of the room, putting himself between her and the elevator shaft. The warden burst through the floor with an explosion of wood and metal, landing in the center of the room with a silent, jarring impact. Its red eye fixed on Izuku, then swiveled to the banks of servers humming against the wall. Its purpose was clear. This is my fight, Izuku said, planting his feet. Alfred, tactics. Class 7 is heavily armored and adapts to energy signatures, the AI reported coolly. Direct confrontation is ill-advised. Use the environment. Its primary objective is the data, not you. Protect the servers. The warden lunged, not at Izuku, but at the main server bank. It was impossibly fast. Izuku reacted on instinct, pushing off with 5% of one for all. He wasn't a hammer or a scalpel, he was a shield. He slammed into the warden's side, a blur of green and black. The impact was like hitting a mountain. He succeeded only in diverting its path slightly, sending it crashing through a rack of secondary monitors instead of the main servers. Sparks flew. The warden righted itself instantly, its head tilting as it analyzed him. Its red eye glowed brighter. From her corner, Barbara watched on a surviving monitor, her face a mask of disbelief. She saw the raw power, the green lightning crackling around the boy's form. But she also saw the control. He wasn't just smashing. He was intercepting. Protecting. Disruptor grenades, right hip pouch, Alfred coached. Izuku hurled 2 discs that stuck to the warden's chassis and erupted in a shower of electrical energy. The warden seized for a second, its movements stuttering. Izuku pressed the advantage, using a move from the Nightwing combat files, a flowing, acrobatic kick that targeted the knee joint. The metal screeched but didn't break. The warden adapted. It ignored the electrical attacks and lashed out with a claw. Izuku dodged, but the tip of the claw scraped across his chest plate, leaving a deep, sizzling gouge in the nth metal and sending a jolt of agony through his body. The suit's integrity held, but only just. It is learning, Agent M. It is prioritizing you as the primary obstacle. The fight became a deadly dance around the precious data servers. Izuku used his agility, his speed, and every gadget Alfred suggested. He brought down a heavy brass bell from the ceiling with a targeted grapnel shot, staggering the warden. He used smoke pellets to obscure its vision, switching to his own thermal sensors to land precise, targeted blows. He was fighting smarter than he ever had in his life. But the warden was relentless. It was stronger, more durable. It cornered him against the far wall, raising both claws for a final, piercing strike that would go straight through his chest. Behind it, Izuku could see a critical server bank, the one displaying the last uncensored historical and cultural records of Earth. Barbara's life's work. Her last stand against oblivion. He had no time to dodge. No angle for a gadget. It was a choice. His life, or the legacy of a world. It wasn't a choice at all. Instead of trying to escape, Izuku braced himself. He channeled 10% of one for all not into his fists, but into his entire body, reinforcing his stance. He crossed his arms over his chest in an X, the suit's gauntlets glowing with contained power. He was going to take the hit. He was going to be the wall. Barbara screamed no! From across the room. She had seen this before. This exact brand of reckless, stupid, beautiful heroism. The warden's claws slammed into him. The impact was titanic. The sound was a deafening shriek of protesting metal and crackling energy. The legacy suit's chest plate buckled, cracking under the strain. Pain, white-hot and absolute, exploded in Izuku's chest. He felt ribs break, the suit's internal dampeners screaming as they failed. A cry of agony was torn from his lips, but he held. He slid back 10 feet, his boots carving trenches in the floor, but he did not fall. He had taken the full, unimpeded blow, and the servers behind him were untouched. The warden, its claws stuck for a microsecond in the wreckage of his armor, was overextended. Vulnerable. Through a haze of pain, Izuku saw his opening. Alfred, full power, to the gauntlets. He gasped. Warning! Catastrophic feedback is likely. Do it! The green energy of One for All, wild and untamed, surged down his arms. The regulation channels on the suit flared, glowing with the intensity of a sun before starting to spark and overload. He uncrossed his arms, grabbing the warden's own claws. Detroit. Smash! He roared, pouring every ounce of his remaining strength, his pain, and his desperate hope into one focused, point-blank blast. The explosion of green light and concussive force blew the top of the clock tower out. The warden was hurled backwards, its chassis shattered, its organic components flash-fried. It crashed into the far wall, a heap of sparking, twitching scrap, its red eye flickering and dying. Silence returned, broken by the wind whistling through the new hole in the roof and the sound of Izuku collapsing to his knees, then to the floor, smoke pouring from his shattered chest plate. Barbara stared, frozen for a second, at the hole in her roof, at the destroyed warden, at the bleeding boy on her floor. Then she moved. Her chair whirred as she sped across the room to his side. She knelt beside him, her practiced hands assessing the damage. The suit was ruined. Through a tear in the undersuit, she could see a chest bruised black and purple, the unmistakable sign of massive internal trauma. He was coughing, speckles of blood dotting his lips, but his eyes, hazy with pain, were focused not on her, but on the server bank behind her. Is it okay? He rasped, his voice a bare whisper. Your history. Barbara looked from his earnest, pain-filled face to the humming, undamaged servers containing the last memories of her world. This boy, this impossible child from another reality, had just offered his life not for victory, but for a library. For a memory. The cynical armor she had worn for a decade cracked, shattered, and fell away, leaving only the woman who had once been a hero, the woman who had guided a generation of them. The dam of her grief broke, and a single, hot tear traced a path down her cheek. She placed a gentle, steadying hand on his shoulder. Okay, kid, she said, her voice thick with an emotion she thought she'd forgotten. You're a damn fool. She looked up at the broken roof, at the dark, indifferent sky. Her fight wasn't over. It had just begun again. Let's get you patched up, she said, her voice regaining its familiar, steely edge of command. Then, you and I are going to take a look at Bruce's homework.